There it goes. Now I hit the goddamn button. Quieter. Because I turned it down. Hey everybody, how's it going?
Hey man. Hey, what's going on, everybody?
How you doing, Pete?
I'm doing good, man. Tired, but ready to do this. Been up since early flight.
Yeah, I hate the way they do that. All right, well, so I'm Scott and he's Pete. Y'all know this, or you wouldn't be watching right now because you must be following one or the both of us on Twitter to have known this was going to happen. Boy, I better tell the boys in the Reddit room or they're going to be pissed. So it's the end of the empire. And it's a Libertarian Institute show. It's on our Libertarian Institute channel. Sarah says, I feel like Scott's always late. You know what? We were perfectly on time. I said, I just don't know how to work this thing. So I didn't know which button to hit. Otherwise, we were set. So, yeah. God dang. I am the director of the Libertarian Institute. And Pete, of course, is the managing editor. Sitting in Will Grigg's chair.
Ugh.
And we're anti-government extremist types, basically. And yeah, so this is our new show, The End of the Empire. I think I have a little bit of a bias toward focus on foreign policy stuff, and Pete likes covering the dissolution of the United States here in North America. And so, you know, I think we got a lot to talk about. It should be interesting for people, somewhat. I was thinking, you know, you're such a firebrand, and I'm so old now that like
I'm older than you.
You really make me seem, you know, calm. And I was thinking one of the show could be called, like an alternative title for the show could be Thesis Antithesis. Because then, like, if we can get people to settle for a middle ground of somewhere between where I'm at and where you're at, then we'll be great.
It'd be fine with me. It'd be a ton better than what we got right now.
Yeah. So I don't know if you know that anecdote where it's in the movie it's in the autobiography of Malcolm X, where he's at this event with Coretta Scott King, and they're all talking to a bunch of white liberals in the Northeast somewhere or something, and he goes, "Listen, I know you don't like me," something like this, but I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna scare the hell out of them, and then when I'm done, they're gonna be eating out of your hand. Get it? And she goes, "Oh, okay." And so he gets up there and is like, "Any means necessary, rah!" And the crowd is like, "Oh my God." And then Coretta Scott King gets up there and it's like, "You know, we'd like a little bit of respect." And they're like, "We can give you that. We got respect." You know. So, you know, I think we'll play it like that. You know, you be mad as hell and I'll be mad as heck, and we'll get it just right, you know.
Well, I did something last night that you've done before.
Get your hand out of my podcast. That's I'm sorry. Oh, what now?
I did something last night that you've done before.
Oh, yeah, the Tim Pool show. So that's what I was going to ask you. You mentioned you're traveling there.
Yeah.
I saw the whole episode, stayed up late last night watching the whole thing. And I thought you did great, man, at the part where you're allowed to participate in the deal.
Well, it was one of those things, you know, it's like Tim, his whole audience is right. And Tim leans right. Even Ian's leaning right nowadays. And then they have a friggin' right winger on, you know, who's running, you know, and I'm like, I'm going to have to be the best right winger in the room.
Yep.
And I think I did it.
Yeah, I think you're great on it. And then, you know, especially I was a little frustrated, like, man, I really wish that they would let him talk more. Ask you some questions.
Tim went on some rants. You know, Tim went on some rants, and
well, and that really is
it's his show.
It's not an interview show, right? Like, you're not really there to be interviewed. You're there to also be part of the same discussion that he's already having, whether you show up or not, which is fine. It's just different. It's, you know, you're not there to be interviewed, really. It's just, it's a different thing than that. But, you know, I thought it was great. And, you know, I don't know that you and I are 100% on all this culture war stuff as it stands right now, but I don't care about that, man. You know, all I care about is foreign policy. And from my point of view, you did the best job ever.
Yeah, I do okay on China?
Yeah, you did great. I mean, this is exactly, I mean, whatever. The rule always is be yourself, right? But I'm just saying, in effect, the way it all came out was hate the left, hate the left, hate the left, hate the left for an hour and 50 minutes. And then 10 minutes of, I ain't afraid of no China, which is just perfect. And I think when I went on there and said I ain't afraid of no China, the audience was like, this guy's a communist. Because and it didn't matter that I was just citing Pat Buchanan saying we shouldn't have saved the Soviet Union or whatever, doesn't matter. This guy's a red. Just look at him. But I think you did a great job of establishing how red you ain't before it got to that part, which was just the very end part of the conversation there. And then, I think you're great. And I don't think you could do better than to cite David Stockman. David Stockman is notably bearish on everything all the time, but that doesn't mean he's wrong. He might be a little bit early on some of his calls, but whether everything is going to hell the way he says is never in doubt, and, so yeah, no, I thought it was great. And, for the people who missed it, I mean, tell them about it. What happened there?
Yeah, well, I mean, there was just a lot of culture war stuff, and it was fine. I don't have any problem getting into that, and we talked some about COVID and everything, and then I brought up the fact that when I was sick that I took ivermectin, and just so this doesn't get taken down, it's not approved for COVID to treat COVID, but that's what I think he freaked out a little bit about that, and understood. He makes a lot of money off of those live streams and everything, and he just wanted to make sure that everything was everything was above board and that he covered his butt. So I'm cool. I was cool with it. I had a great time, and hopefully they'll just invite me back soon. And on the China stuff, what was funny was you would send me all those Stockman articles, and I'm reading one Stockman article after another, and then the day before, like Tuesday, Ryan McMakin writes an article for Mises.org, and they put it out in audio form. And it's about this book that some Harvard warhawk wrote called Unrivaled in 2018, where he just goes down like statistics and like all this demographic stuff about why China is why you don't have to worry about China. And it's only like 17 minutes long, so I just downloaded it, and on the plane I was just listening to it over and over again. So like most 90% of I would say 70% of what I spewed just came right out of that podcast, right out of that article, because it was and I made a point to say, this guy's not a realist, this guy's not anti-war, this guy's a hawk, and he says don't worry about China.
Yeah. And, I actually didn't read that McMacken article. I can't wait to get my hands on that. But there was an article that they ran at Mises. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the guy's name. I even interviewed him about it. Mullen was his last name. Solus Mullen, something like that. And he wrote a thing about essentially China's already an overextended empire, man. What are they going to do? They're going to bite off India or something? In fact, when we were at Freedom Fest, one of my new friends I made at Freedom Fest pointed out that like they had this border dispute in the Himalayas, and they were all ordered. The commanders ordered the men to all throw down their rifles, and they went over there and had a big fist fight. And they essentially, I'm not sure who kicked whose ass, but they didn't shoot each other because they're just in no position to. Who are they going to take on? You look at, and in fact, when I also at Freedom Fest, I did a panel there that was moderated by Grover Norquist.
Okay.
And one of the points that he made, he says, man, you look at China and they're surrounded by, not necessarily enemies, but certainly people who do not feel like taking any shit from them whatsoever.
And liabilities. Like North Korea is a liability to have on your border.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, even both Koreas don't want to lose their independence to China, have no, intention of being dominated by China. Japan and obviously Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia.
Vietnam had a border skirmish with Vietnam in 2004. There were border skirmishes between 2014 and 2015 with Vietnam that there were firefights.
Yeah. When they've invaded Vietnam over and over again, like over the centuries. So the Vietnamese are really nationalist and anti-Chinese in that sense, which don't want to screw up your domino theory or anything here, boys. But the Vietnamese had no intention of just being the puppets of Mao Zedong whatsoever. But anyway, but then India and Pakistan and Mongolia, right? Like it doesn't make sense if you are running things in Beijing to think, yeah, what we're gonna do is we're gonna invade and dominate Pakistan. Like, no, you're not. They're friends with Pakistan. That's an entirely, alien culture and civilization to theirs. It makes no sense to think they're gonna do that. Or even like I don't know exactly the ledger on it, but like what would it cost for them to roll in and invade and conquer outer Mongolia? At least tens of billions of dollars to do that. And then to what profit and with what kind of long-term, insurgency and other problems that they're going to have to deal with. And like, wouldn't it just be worth it to do business with the Mongolians? You know what I mean? Just like that's probably the most likely problem would be their invasion of Taiwan. And like, not to channel Doug Bondo or anything too much, but just that doesn't sound like my problem to me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but that's just not within America's national interest. They talk about it like it's Hawaii, but it ain't,
I mean, but there's like so many factors, that that stat about how 30% of the farming in China is still either done by hand or animal. That's insane when it's less than
Yeah.
1% in the United States. I mean,
Yeah.
that's nuts. And I didn't know about the diabetes. And it's not because they're fat, it's because their diets are terrible. And like the average person who lives in Shanghai is breathing in 40 cigarettes a day. I mean, forget about all that. Look what they've done to their currency. I mean, in 25 years, they've destroyed their currency more than the United States has with the Federal Reserve in 108 years. I mean, their debt to GDP already matches the United States,
Right.
and it could be past it. It could be past it at this point because that book was written in 2018, and it's not
Right.
getting better. Their second biggest mortgage company, Evergrande, their bonds were trading at 50%. Now they were just taken. They were just considered to.
Man, I really wonder about that. Like, can they have like a total unraveling of their real estate market that their government can't intervene and prop up? That's just going to completely come apart like ours did in 2008 kind of thing. It
Well,
could be,
I mean, Evergrande could be their Lehman, but if you understand that everything there is basically a lease. So like Evergrande owns, from what I understand, Evergrande owns property that if you took 4 Manhattans, it's like the size of 4 Manhattans in the country itself. And it's really a lease. So they really own it, but anyone who lives on is sort of leasing it. And, but the way I would assume, like, so if that bank goes out of business, I mean, people who are investors around the world, I mean, they're not stupid. They're not scared of China. They're not scared that they're going to get, someone's going to show up on their doorstep and put a bullet in their head. They're going to pull their money out. And I mean, you could see a 2008 happen. Now they could prop it up by the one way how would they prop it up? Just go back to a cultural revolution, go back to Mao times. Yeah. And that's what the article you shared with me, I actually clicked through the link and actually read the manifesto, and that's just nuts. I mean, that's just pure nationalism.
Yeah, you mean Xi's new declaration of, all the new inward turning stuff?
I don't know if that was
What was
Xi. I don't know who. I don't remember who it was who did it, but you sent it, and it was that one article that was called
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what it was
China
in.
China on the cusp of a profound transformation. And that was Asia Times. And then when you click through to the hardline commentary, and let me get the English version, by Li Guangmin Binjin, everyone can feel that a profound change is underway. And he just immediately starts going after the culture, starts going after the femboy culture, all these feminine men on TV, and how much money they're making, how
And
much
talking
money
about an
these.
arms buildup to face down the United States is, I think a big part of it too.
Yeah, but really, when you read it, that's like this much of it. Everything else is internal.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, the United States. I mean, how would the United States even think about making a move on China? I mean, that would be the dumbest thing. I mean, especially if you understand geography. I mean,
Yeah. I think people, even, Americans too, just as bad probably as anybody, have faith in central planning that, like, they have so much power to wield over their people to make things the way that they want. Like, one thing that you could argue that they can do that we won't tolerate, right, is our massive infrastructure projects. Like, we want to
yeah,
completely remake this bay, or we want to build, a huge industrial, part of a city, and just, get it all set up and then let people fill it in later. And these kind of huge government investments, um, massive train projects and stuff like that, where they don't give a damn about eminent domain. They'll do whatever they want.
mhm.
And so some of those things could probably be, profitable in the long term, probably, like some of the infrastructure stuff that they do. And yet, at least in the larger, the biggest businesses, and because I hear, contrary to this, on the smaller level, in fact, I think it was you that interviewed that guy that just come back from China. Was talking about how free their economy was, like on the lower level. Somebody just wants to
Yeah,
go
yeah.
into business, they leave you alone. But
Mhm.
for the biggest firms, I mean, all the decisions that they make are political decisions. And, you know, it could be that this is just, libertarian bias kind of point of view, but I just think it's really right that essentially, even if it can be made up for somehow or another, essentially any government intervention in the economy is a distortion and is screwing things up
Mhm.
from the way things would be if they would stay out of it. and
Well,
and probably, for the worse. And so when you have an economy as political as theirs, well, look at how political ours is and how screwed up our economy is. It's because all these choices are being made by people who it's not their capital being invested, so they don't give a damn, you know.
right wingers and even libertarians have to understand that they what's one of the main libertarian memes, commun that wasn't real communism.
Oh, right,
Well,
yeah.
if this was real, and communism never works. Well, if this is real communism, it's going to fall apart. What are you scared of? Yeah, I
Right.
never. Yeah, it's like, okay, a dying animal, a dying prey animal can be dangerous as they're dying. But China
Sure.
seems more like if everything started falling apart there, I think they're going to lash out inward, just like they've done in the past. They always punish their own people. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a long history of
Well, and
that.
look, I mean, okay, let's say best case scenario that, you know, they get as more and more free market as they can for the betterment of their people that they can. And their GDP continues to grow and even outpace ours. They do have a billion people. We got 300 million. And they have an economy that's much more geared toward manufacturing and all of that. So let's say that they started making really smart decisions and making more money. Okay, still, how long is that going to take them to build a world empire to threaten us, presuming that they would want any such thing? And, I'm not an expert on Chinese culture and whatever, but everything I know about it says that they consolidated their empire a couple of thousand years ago and don't have much interest in expansion to the, east or west or any other thing. And,
Well,
you,
everybody
you know,
wants to talk about the Belt and Road, and if their economy is falling apart, that's going to fall apart. I mean, that's probably one of the most expensive projects they'll ever undergo.
right. And yeah, and who even says that's going to be profitable, right? Like that's the kind of thing where it probably like only a politician could imagine that here's what we're going to do. We're going to build a road all the way to Lisbon. And it's going to pay off eventually, man. But that might take 100 years, But then the other thing with that too is, right, they want to build the Belt and Road. They're going to have to kiss everybody's ass all the way to Lisbon. They can't be the Chinese Red Army rolling through Central Asia and picking a fight with every person in their own homeland, trying to get, even to far Eastern Europe. I mean, we're talking 10,000 miles or something across that thing. So, you know, the idea that they're going to just, build this giant militarist empire and make all this money with it. It just doesn't seem right to me. Look at how much money we've just blown. And when we talk about the $10 trillion cost of the terror war, isn't that recognized as just a total loss? We don't say we made $10 trillion on the terror war. No, we spent $10 trillion. Some asshole got a McMansion in eastern Virginia there, or whatever it is. But that doesn't translate out to the rest of us whatsoever. So, it's fun to be scared, and the yellow peril is a great one. And hey, there's a billion of them. And so, just use your imagination, Pete, what you could do with that many men if you had
it was
imagination,
And it was such a status question that set me off yesterday. I guess someone super chatted and said, well, the United States can't break up and secede because then China would be,
oh, right.
I forget what they said. I forget who they said would come
eat
right.
our lunch or whatever.
Yeah, would come right. I mean, and you hear that. I hear libertarians say that. And when a libertarian says that, to me, their argument is, well, we can only have Ancapistan and it has to be all the way around the world. And what does that sound like? That sounds like the objectivists who basically, when you break down their whole ideology, it turns into a one world government.
Seriously. And this is where the liberventionists were, with the Iraq War. No, you can't have freedom in one country. Oh, yeah. No, but you can have freedom in your one country once you're done overthrowing the entire rest of the world through warfare. Man, are you going to be free at the end of that? Give me a break, man.
You can't have one free country. Switzerland enters the chat.
Yeah, exactly right. And look at the counterfactual. And it is September 11th. It's a Saturday. I'm going to be in DC doing this big protest about it. And you had the fall of the Afghan, regime that America had propped up there for 20 years, right at this time. You get a lot of people doing some hard reflection, I think, about it. It's kind of unavoidable, right? They're like, man, what are we doing? 20 years and to kill 400 guys, there's just, I understand how caught up people were in it at the time, but man, there ain't no way to look back at what happened and not just understand that Bush exploited people's panic and fear in order to get away with expanding this massive ulterior agenda into the Middle East. And as I say, the truthers might as well have been right that Dick Cheney did it, because Dick Cheney might as well have done it. Same damn difference to the degree for the degree to which they exploited it to get all that done. And I'm hearing guys who guarantee were hawks then, who are saying now, when it would be easy for them to just say, oh, Biden screwed up the withdrawal, are saying, what did we fight for? Did you see this guy on Tucker Carlson, Joe Kent, right-wing America First guy running for Congress in Washington State? And he's the perfect example of what I'm talking about. He's running as a Republican. And he's a combat veteran. And he's up there and he's mad as hell about Biden botching the withdrawal the way that he botched it. And then he says, and Tucker, they've been lying to us this whole time. They said it was worth it for us to spend our buddies' lives on this project to build up this government and this army. And then the whole thing just vanishes in the blink of an eye like this. I mean, they were lying to us, and took it hard. And then Carlson set him up and goes, well, isn't it a shame that there's never, ever, 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 ever going to be accountability? And he goes, yeah, there is too, God damn it, because I'm going to win for Congress and the Republicans are going to win the Congress. And we're going to have an investigation, not just into the withdrawal of Afghanistan, but into the entire war on terrorism, Tucker. And we're going to investigate Iraq War too, also, because they lied us into that. And everybody knows it. They lied us into that too. And it's time for a real reckoning. It's time for real accountability. After 20 years of, because, you had guys who fought in both wars. And they were like, well, Iraq sure went to hell with the rise of the Islamic State and all of that. But in Afghanistan, we've made some real progress. Now you got that big round number 20 staring you in the face. I mean, 20 years. The wars could drink. The wars are like a man now. You got people who weren't born yet or were babies, like infants, who were deployed to Afghanistan, who were, infants when the war began. This kind of craziness. And so people are looking back and they're just, it seems like it's a great opportunity for us to really drive home that, all this militarism is just a bunch of crap. You don't have to believe in it at all. None of it's true at all. All this panic about China, it's not about China rising to become the unipolar power in the world. It's about the relative decline of American power because, one, the rest of the world was getting richer and was coming to equal America in wealth and influence anyway. And then Bush decided to blow our entire wad of everything that we had saved up in the Middle East. Well, we're already in debt, $10 trillion by then anyway. But, him, and I'm not letting Obama and Trump off the hook, but I'm just saying it was Bush who did all this, who kicked the pile over there. And then, so then that means our imperial collapse and decline and retreat is happening sooner than it otherwise would have. And then, so like a spoiled child, they're lashing out and blaming everybody else and saying, it's China that did this. I was talking with a friend earlier. He said he's just trolling this right-wing friend. So the CCP financed 9/11. And his buddy goes, really? I mean, show me some articles like that. And he goes, dude, that's bullshit. I just made it up. Or he goes, no, it's not true. And the guy says, well, don't just dismiss it until you've really looked into it. And he goes, dude, I just made it up just now, just to mess with you, dude. Look how bad you want to believe in this stuff. It's just, so what if, come to the realization, like how shocking would it be? Think of it. Like, what if the American empire fell and then no power even tried to rise to replace it? Because how could they? The Chinese wouldn't dream of being able to afford such a thing. Japan, they had their empire, didn't end so well for them. The Europeans, they're completely spent. They're on America's dole. And so even the EU all combined couldn't embark on an imperial project, the likes of which America has tried to get away with for the last 30 years and 20 years. And so, like, what might that look like? What if Dave Smith won the presidency and just said, look, it's a multipolar world now. Who cares? And then that's all it was. What if it was not a bipolar world between us and China or a unipolar world under Chinese imperial domination? What if it was a world of sovereign nation states, and all, with their relative power being essentially based on their economic power? America and our European friends and the Japanese, leading with the Indians and the Brazilians and whatever kind of middle rank powers slowly catching up. And then, what else do you expect? What are they going to do? Russia, China, and Europe are all going to gang up against us. I got a big map on my wall right here. China's huge, but compared to the rest of Asia, it ain't that huge, right? Like if you were running China, you would not be looking at a map of Eurasia and going, oh yeah, that'll be easy. We're just going to bite off all that and chew it. Like, no, you're not.
Yeah, and do it during winter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're going straight to Moscow. It's going to be fine, People do this all the time, So,
oh, man.
So, I mean, I think that's it. And then, as far as, dissolving the United States, I'm a good ANCAP, like the rest of us here. But, the reality is that if we had anything like a consensus for going by the Constitution, then we'd be 95% of the way to anarcho-capitalism anyway. And the degree of decentralization of power among the 50 states, count them, 50 states, that's a lot. And if we just had, that'd be a great start if we could get back to de-emphasizing DC and decentralizing power here in the country, political power, and then just let people be. And again, with the counterfactual, just think if we hadn't spent the last 30 years doing this, just think if since the end of the Cold War, you'd had Ron Paul and Harry Brown and libertarians in charge this whole time to just America.
Even Pat Buchanan and a couple of the Paleos.
Yeah. Yeah, even Buchanan and a couple of the paleos. I mean, how many tariffs on China are they really going to rack up? Not enough to ruin everything, you know? And just think that $10 trillion that they blew on the terror wars, just think of all that was just invested instead. Invested and then reinvested and then reinvested. And all that brain power, all those man hours, and all of the muscle power, right? All those infantrymen could have been lifting heavy things, doing important work. And all the engineers buried down in the basement of the Pentagon, drawing a new gun and then crumpling it up and then drawing another one, when these guys could be helping humanity advance and providing goods and services to people at lower and lower prices. Um, and so, it ain't utopia, but man, the counterfactual is so much better than this. And then that means that going forward, it could be too. That like really doesn't have to be this way. It never did, and it doesn't have to now. And like, you really succeed in decentralizing power to such a great degree. We might even find we don't even have anything to hate about each other so much anymore. I did see you made a great point last night about, Dallas is full communism and Fort Worth are, right wing MAGA hat guys. And these are like the twin cities right there next to each other, these two gigantic cities. Obviously, Dallas bigger, but still, right there. They can't really secede from each other. They're going to stay part of Texas, for the indefinite future. But just the question is, how many things do these different populations get to decide for each other, and how much of their decision is based on home rule? And I know you've seen The Patriot, that Mel Gibson movie, where he's like,
Course, yeah.
why should I trade one tyrant 3,000 miles away for 3,000 tyrants 1 mile away? Right? Like local control doesn't necessarily buy you liberty, but it
Right.
buys you a fighting chance at it. Right? It buys you the ability to team up with your buddies and go down there and at least have your say and participate in the process in a way that you can get some mileage there, even though the lady next door, Karen, might be worse than Joe Biden by 100 times if she gets a chance to get at you. You know what I mean? It just depends on the situation. But so I wanted to, ask you about that, because I know that you've been focusing a lot more lately on kind of local libertarian politics. And this is something that I think probably doesn't get as much attention as part of the Mises Caucus narrative. That the Mises Caucus, of course, Dave is the big star and we're going to run him for president. And that whole thing is going to be badass. But we're trying to get thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of libertarians to join the Mises Caucus and the Libertarian Party, not just to support Dave, but to bring a whole new generation of libertarians into the party so that they can use it for local political purposes. And, I'm not exclusivist about the LP at all. There are plenty of avenues and ways to go about, local politics. Obviously, the Free State Project is doing a great job up in New Hampshire of, I think, oh, you were gone by the time I got there. But when I went to Pork Fest, I got some great talking tos by some people about how well that they have been doing and the percentage of the power that they hold. I think they hold a solid majority in the state house. And the House Speaker is like a fellow traveler, not really one of them, but is pretty good, I think they said. But I think they said they have the majority of the Republican seats in the
Mm-hmm.
state house there.
Yeah, they all
So,
run
but anyway,
Republican.
so yeah, I just wanted to hear from you about like what are your ideas about all of that, and if you have ideas, especially for like the future of the Mises Caucus once Dave runs. Well, not just once he runs, but on the way to him running, there's a lot of work to be done. And then once he runs, then what?
Yeah, well, here's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Today, Bernie from Weekend at Bernie's, they brought him out to the podium, and he announced that any company that has more than 100 or more employees, they're going to mandate a vaccine on them.
I saw that
And
today. I mean,
and Abbott already said this isn't happening.
oh, did
So
he?
yeah, Abbott already is like this isn't happening. We haven't heard anything from DeSantis yet, but I'm sure DeSantis is going to say the same thing. And it's not local politics; it's state politics, but it's federalism.
Yeah.
It's better. It's better than what we have now. And I just honestly believe that at the local level is the best way to push back. Is you and your people in your town, especially if you're in a small town. Small town, I mean, like 4 or 5 of you could run everything. Could be all the influence, as long as you're impressive people and you're not, you know,
Right.
Showing up drunk and stuff like that, high as balls. Well, except you do really well. The
Got a high tolerance, man.
but yeah, so I mean, it's like I think I said this last night is
Yeah.
if you have the ATF or you have the DEA coming in and they don't have and you've told your sheriffs to stand down or even better, tell them don't let them in. Meet them at the meet them at the border of the town. What are they going to do? I mean, these aren't we know from Michael Bolden, these aren't high they don't have high budgets. So and they're not going to start printing money to do this. I mean, they're just not. I mean, there'll be enough people. There are enough people who've already said, "I'll take the vaccine anyway." And so, I think really, when it comes down to it, you take over, decide you're going to take over your town council, get a couple people elected, do it however you have to do it. A lot of those positions you don't have to declare Republican or Democrat.
Right.
And then, like my friend Andrew from Popular Liberty has this idea of setting up just like the Nordic countries have sovereign wealth funds to for like I think Norway's is like their social security fund is in a sovereign wealth fund where they have like everybody theoretically has $1 million if they retired at this point. They invested it mostly in oil in their oil industry, and so you get a couple people in there and you just push this. I mean, it's a nice little idea. It plays really well to right wingers. You're telling them, hey, we're going to cut taxes. It's going to allow you to, it's going to be something that you can dip into for spending and you won't have to tax people. And then you go with this and then you just start building upon that and building upon that. And I think I think the problem with local politics is that people don't want to they don't think it matters. And terms like, there is a reason why phrases like all politics is local are important. And yeah, I mean, I just see that really it's the only way to, I mean, if they really got tyrannical and they were like, okay, we're going to pick a couple towns to send people, we're going to make an example out of a couple towns and we're going to march in there and say, hey, look, you have to take this vaccine. I mean, they're not going to choose blue towns. Towns that are mostly blue are already probably mostly vaccinated. They're going to pick red. And I mean, that's when you're going to see, you probably see solidarity. A guy contacted me the other day right outside of Boise and was telling me that the school district wanted to do mask mandates for the kids. And like so many people showed up, they couldn't fit in the auditorium to protest it and just said, no, this is not happening. And they said, well, okay, so if you want your kids to be exempt from masks, show up tomorrow and fill out this form and everything. And like he said, he thought that people who were actually for the mask mandate actually showed up to sign it. He said it seemed like most of the people who were who had kids there showed up to sign it. It's just going to be something local, man. I think that is the best way to fight. I mean, we know the 202 area code. I mean, how much of a dent can you make in it? I mean, Ron Paul was there for how long?
The thing is too is they're so caught in their bubble of righteousness too that they can't imagine how bad they look and how much backlash is coming. Like if you look at all the discussion of how blacks and Mexicans voted for Donald Trump in higher numbers in 2020 than they did in 2016. And nobody on TV, when they talked about that fact, nobody said, well, it's because of the lockdowns, man. Democrats have the reputation. You're the lockdown party. And the Republicans are less worse on that. I got a buddy of mine who's, a regular guy with a regular job. I'm pulling the handle for all Republicans, man. Save my ass from these Democrats and their lockdowns. That's all I care about. I care about one thing only. We got to stop these goddamn Democrats, man. Forget it. And Trump really muddled the message, right? Trump was like, I'm the lockdown leader and I lock down better than anybody. I'm the lockdown thing. And so he kind of stepped on his own feet doing that. But still, overall, that was the message, was like there was a push to the right. The margin, as Hillary Clinton would have said, like, why am I not ahead by 50 points or whatever? The margin could have been much bigger after the, just chaos of destabilization of the Trump years, as much as people hated the Clintons. It wasn't Hillary running against him, but that was a huge, detriment to the Democrats. I think we're going to see in the midterms and in the general coming up, there's going to be a huge backlash to the right against the Democrats and their push for all these lockdowns and all this stuff. And they're so sure they're right that they're just not listening to people tell them that, like, man, this has gone too far. It's just not going to work. And like, look at the way that they pretend that anyone who refuses a vaccine are all a bunch of idiot right-wing Republican rednecks, when that's just not true. It's poor people, and poor Black people are a huge part of the demographics of people who don't trust government medicine. People always pretend, and it's true, like on the activist level, there are a lot of Black socialist leaders and radical leaders. But for the most part, American Blacks are not socialists. They're right-wing Democrats. They voted for Hillary and Biden over Bernie Sanders in the last 2 elections in the primaries. And they're terrified of government medicine because they're not stupid. They've lived through the bad end of government medicine. And, Tuskegee is not just like an old wives' tale or something. That's real. They let these guys believe that they were being treated for syphilis for decades without doing anything about it. And then when it comes to like putting plutonium in retarded kids' oatmeal, or with all the crazy government experiments, they do that to poor Black people. That's who they can get away with doing it to, and Black prisoners. And so, guess who's not getting the vaccine? And they're like, well, what we're going to do is we're going to set up this system just like with their gun control. Right. They like to imagine that it's right-wing rednecks are going to receive the brunt end of all of this. But it's not who's going to receive it. It's their own constituency who are going to be, on the shit end of this. And I just don't know. I mean, I didn't see Biden's speech today, but I saw, people talking about it. And I have no idea what they're thinking that they're going to do that. I mean, you're talking about tens of millions of people now that the government's going to force them out of their jobs. Are you kidding me? Like Jim Bovar was like, dude, this is a declaration of war against 80 million Americans. Are you insane? Now, what do they expect to be the backlash from this? Which brings me back to on your local thing. Seems to me, not the baby boomers. I'm not talking about them. They're the same ones from the Bush years. But the millennial right wingers are much more libertarian and are the kinds of people who I don't expect to be impressed by a lot of right-wing culture war crap in terms of like the war on pot and things like that. I don't imagine them being very impressed by arguments that we got to keep up the SWAT raids over kids smoking grass and shit like that, and especially when they're coming, of age and will be coming to power in a time like you're describing, where this just an absolute emergency of personal liberty like this. And so, I'm with you. And I think, libertarians are not right wingers. It's different, but we ain't leftists either. And by the way, the leftists aren't liberals either. And I think in the scheme of things, I like to see a real poll, but I bet real leftists are a very small percentage of people on the left side of the political spectrum. Most people over there are just liberals and progressives, and like real leftists, they're really good on a lot of stuff a lot of the times. And if you had to flip a coin on a liberal or a leftist and what their position would be on lockdowns and vaccine mandates and stuff, the leftists, I think, would be better than the liberals. The liberals, meaning more like Democrats, more like Hillary Clinton types versus, look at somebody like Max Blumenthal and Glenn Greenwald, who are to the left of the progressives. And they're really backlashing against all this medical tyranny stuff, And seriously, like, how many leftists are getting red pilled on medical socialism by this right now, too? They're like, as libertarians, we're too hard on them, man. We think that they're all too far gone or something like that. But how obvious is the argument that, man, we shouldn't have an FDA or a CDC at all. We shouldn't be listening to these people. They should not be in charge of making these decisions for other people. And look at like the nightmare in England where they have the NHS, where it's one set of decision makers for the medical life of every person in the nation, and where they make terrible decisions, right? Like, no matter the circumstances, you're not allowed to go hold your mom's hand as she dies when she doesn't have COVID and you don't have COVID. But that's just our rules for the hospital, and whatever it is, just crazy stuff, the way that they've done it. And it seems like a great opportunity for libertarians to say to leftists kind of gently, not like, haha, I told you so, but like, hey guys, there's a real reason to doubt that putting the US federal government in charge of all of our healthcare is actually a good idea. You know what I mean? And people say, well, we just want single payer, but you pay the piper, you call the tune. That's how that goes. And you see how quick the liberals are to say, yeah, we should withhold treatment from people who didn't get the vaccine. We should triage all of them and make them all go to the back of the line. They'll turn like that on a dime. They'll withhold your treatment from you for crossing them, just like a Soviet commissar, right? For making a decision that they disapprove of. And if they can do that to you over refusing the vaccine, then they can do that to you for being too fat. Oh, well, you shouldn't be eating donuts. You go to the back of the line. You shouldn't be smoking cigarettes. You go to the back of the line. Whereas in a capitalist economy, you got money, come on in. You want to pay fee for service, you get treatment. And none of this, some other commissar deciding whether you've jumped through all their, hoops or not. Yeah.
Look at this meme. Look at this meme.
What do you got?
Can you see this meme?
No. Oh, here, add to stream. There it goes. I'm new at this stuff. Oh, hell, I can't see it. Hang on, let me supersize it. Ah, yep, good. Very good.
That's a great meme.
Yep. Yeah, man. So look, when they first came out with this vaccine passport stuff, I think I told you and I told Dave, this is never going to fly. They can't do this because it's too hard. It's too unfair on racial minorities, which is, a huge Democratic constituency. And it's just, it's all like upper middle class white liberals who think that this is all okay. And I'm just waiting for the moment when reality comes crashing down on them and they realize that this is electorally prohibitive, that this is just, again, like with the gun control, you imagine that you're bossing white rednecks out in the countryside around, but that's not who your policies actually target. And I think unlike with gun control, it's just too many masses of people all at once that they're going to come up against here. And I got to admit that, hell, it should never have gotten to this point, right? It should have been never anywhere near this point. And it's amazing that it is this bad. I kind of thought, and I guess the Delta, coming in giant waves has kind of messed this up too. But I was thinking by the time of my debate with Bill Kristol that they'd be repealing these restrictions because things would just be getting better and better. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen in time for that.
Well, when you consider it's a bunch of libertarians, they may just walk through the door.
Yeah. I wonder what's going to happen with that, which, by the way, I think if you go look at the page, it says you have to have the vaccine, but that's not true. But you do have to have a PCR test from within a day saying that you're negative to get in there, which is unfortunate. And under any other circumstances, I wouldn't participate. But, Gene Epstein has gone far out of his way to give me this opportunity to debate Bill Kristol. I got to do it no matter what. But, and, the thing is with the hospital rooms, this is a big thing too. Remember, 15 days to flatten the curve was so they could expand ICU capacity so that the hospitals aren't overwhelmed and we don't have to triage people in the parking lots and all that. Well, that was a year and a half ago almost. And they're out of capacity. And right now, the wife was just telling me about, she has a friend who her father has kidney problems, nothing to do with COVID. And he needs like severe dialysis right now. And he can't get a hospital room anywhere in Central Texas. In fact, he can't get a hospital room anywhere. And she said that they called her and said, come and say goodbye. They can't treat him because they got nowhere to put him because the hospitals are absolutely jam-packed with people right now. And so like one, yeah, that's a pretty bad Delta wave going through. But two, what the hell happened to expanding ICU supply? And of course, we know what the answer is, right? The answer is medical fascism. The answer is the insurance companies and the hospital companies have these certificate of need laws in almost all the states. I think it's like 40 out of 50 that make it a crime to compete with another hospital in your area. So people want to come and open up a new treatment center of any kind, and they can't. And so you'd have to, get the state legislature to pass an exception for you to allow you to do it, kind of thing. It's like car dealerships. Like, who comes up with this crap? You have to buy a car. If you want a new car, you have to get it from a dealer. You can't just buy it from whatever company that people can come up with to distribute cars. It has to be set up this way. It's all as a matter of law. So here we are, a year and a half into the epidemic, and they got people who don't have COVID who are being triaged and dying because people who do have COVID, vaccinated or not, are taking up all the beds. And you can't open up a hospital across the street. You and all your millionaire investor friends want to try to compete with them, or want to help provide medical treatments for reasonable prices. You're not allowed. And, a year and a half into this thing, they never really expanded capacity at all. I mean, that is just, you can sit here and complain about socialized healthcare all day long, but that seems like a problem of fascized healthcare to me, what we have in America now, which is the kind of thing that socialists point to and say, well, that's why capitalism doesn't work. And they kind of have a point and this is why so many libertarians become anarchists like immediately, right? Because you got to admit, business will bribe government to act in exactly contrary to the way that the market would provide, right? To protect supply from the forces of the market. And then as libertarians, we know, well, what are you going to do? Give up property and prices in exchange? No. So you got to give up the state, right? But otherwise, because we know businessmen will bribe the state into screwing their customers. And here we are,
But I really think that going back to talking about local politics is the answer to all that. And you could just start. If you had somebody bold enough, if you had a group of people bold enough, you could start deregulating all that stuff in your town. You can just start saying, okay, well, but we don't have the hospital capacity, so we're going to open up. We have this rich guy, this elite guy over here who's pretty impressive. Open up a clinic across the street and get it opened up overnight. Yep. And you could do it. It would be easy to do. It would be easy to do. And same thing. And
it'd be great, especially if it was like in violation of the state law.
Oh yeah.
Then good, come and prosecute me.
Yeah.
Let's fight.
Yeah, I mean, we know that the corporate press at this point, they control the narrative, and they could make he or she out to be the worst person possible and everything. But you start lining people up and getting giving testimonies about how they were cured and they were helped. You get a local pharmacist to just basically open and do. Especially like generic stuff that's generic, to get that out and get it easy. I mean, this is what is going to have to happen. If they want to keep pushing this bull, this is what is going to have to happen. It's just going to have to be like, okay, we're going to just build what comes next. We're just going to forget about this system and we're just going to start building. And I mean, really, it's going to only really work locally, and then it can spread out, and you can have a whole bunch of satellite cities that are working together and coming up with ideas. But I mean, how else are you going to do it? That's the one thing that, I mean, but he's got a lot of things right. But Hoppe talking about basically decentralizing cities and privatizing everything, and really that's the only way forward. 10,000 Liechtensteins in the United States, functioning city states, and that are mostly private. It's really the only way. And honestly, it's the only thing that I could see in my lifetime actually working, where you could actually have a taste of, okay, this is what these guys, this is what Mises and Rothbard and Hoppe have been talking about for decades, and we can get a little bit of a taste of it. It's not going to be the country falling apart. If the commies had one, if Lenin had anything right, if Engels had anything right, is if everything just falls apart at once, the people who own everything now are just going to buy it back up, and they'll be right back in charge. The people beg them to be in charge. You're going to have to make it work. You're going to have to do something, and you're going to have to just build it. And really, it's just like building a company. You just got to do it.
And look, right now, Pete, is the very best time for this message. And you got people all across this nation who are just getting radicalized into politics right now. The baby boomers are all getting old and retiring and dying. And, us Gen Xers, I don't know if anybody cares what we say, but I think, the new generation of, the millennial right, I think are perfectly primed to hear this message and to be, essentially inculcated into Ron Paulian type republicanism as opposed to the other kind. You know what I mean? So, and look, again, after 20 years of just 30 years of abject failure, I mean, who could rally around the Bush family brand now? Who could say that, yeah, what John McCain said, that was the Republican Party that we want to keep or whatever. Let Mitt Romney lead us into the brave new future. That's not where it's at. That's not where it's at. And if the Republican Party is going to survive, they're going to have to start emphasizing liberty, and they're going to have to mean it. And then for the Mises Caucus and the Libertarian Party, I think that puts us in a great position where we can extort them and say, look, you know what? You guys aren't going to be perfect, but you are going to be perfect on this, this, and this, or we're going to run against you and do everything we can to weaken you and whatever. And if that means that the Democrats win, well, that sucks for us as much as it sucks for you, but it'll be a lesson learned, and we'll see in 2 years.
Yeah.
And then and actually use the power of the Libertarian Party when it, on the state level to split those votes to effect. I met a guy one time, I actually saw a speech by a guy, said he was running for Senate against Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke. So I guess this is in 2018.
Yeah.
And he goes, guess what? I'm polling within the margin of error. And that means that whoever wins, I get to take credit for it. And that means that from now on, they'll have to do whatever we say and be terrified of us because they'll be afraid that we'll do that to them again. And so now the Republicans and the Democrats will only nominate like really good libertarian type Republicans and Democrats. And I'm like, wow, what a slippery slope argument of premises I don't accept. What if, but there's something there, right? So like, for example, what if he had ignored Beto O'Rourke the whole time, or had just, made preliminary, what you call it? Disclaimers. They're like, oh yeah, no, this guy Beto's horrible. Everybody knows that. But anyway, and then just focus on Ted Cruz and barbecue Ted Cruz. He calls himself a constitutionalist. Well, how do you explain this and this and this and this? He's a big government, big spending liberal, and won't stand up for your gun rights and won't bring our troops home from the war, and all, and just whatever, right? And just attack him from the right and barbecue the shit out of him from the right. And then see if that hurts him, maybe, right? And then if Beto O'Rourke wins the election, then you can claim credit for that. They're like, yeah, remember Republicans last time when we waged this massive defamation campaign against your candidate and it worked? Well, that's what happens when you piss us off. Now, here's our list of demands if you want us to not do that to you next time. Now you got a plausible case at least, and they might tell you to just go to hell. We don't care about you. We'll run your car off the road. Screw you. I don't know. We got Karl Rove figuring it all out for us next time. It'll be fine. But if you're going to have a chance of scaring them at all, if you're going to make them worry about you at all, you're going to have to really focus. And you're going to have to say, listen, if Ted Cruz wants us to shut up, he's going to have to do the right thing on these things, and then, and he's got to do them first, not promise. He's got to do what we say first, and then we'll back off. It's just one example, but we could do that for governors. We can do that for senators, for attorney
I've been
generals,
saying that.
and whoever,
I've been saying that.
Absolutely.
You could do that in Florida the next election. You can go to DeSantis and you can say, like right now, and go, look, the Libertarian Party could go to him and go, we're going to run someone to the right of you. And we're going to take all your votes unless you give us this, this, and this now.
Right
now. And you just bribe them. Basically, yeah.
And be
it's
cool
politics, right? Yeah.
Make it a friendly offer, right? Like don't go and pick a fight where you don't have to. But like, yeah, if you can really if it'll really make a difference, then it's definitely worth doing that. And I could see some hardcore Libertarian Party stalwarts saying, "Oh yeah, well, that's you like want to benefit Republicans or Democrats at the expense of the LP or whatever." But I don't really think that's right. I mean, I think that when was the last time the LP candidate won for governor? Right? If we are going to ever win for governor, it's going to be because we made a name for ourselves doing cool shit like this and making it quite apparent to the people of our states that our party matters, what we say matters. And these Republicans and Democrats are right to be scared of us. They should be. They're right to take us seriously. Now everybody else should too. And so, I don't. If we were talking about obstructing good Libertarian Party efforts by somehow compromising on behalf of other parties or something like that, to me is a totally different question. I think people sometimes conflate those ideas. But I think we absolutely can extort, especially the Republican Party. But in some circumstances, I bet we could extort the Democrats too, where, the Libertarians are to the left of the Democrats on good things, like on holding police accountable for killing people, for example, and, a few other things like that. So,
well, what I told Sean Parnell last night is I said, why are you running for Senate when you could run for governor, even mayor of your hometown? And you could run on a simple message of being anti-COVID everything, anti-COVID lockdown, anti-COVID mask, anti-COVID vaccine. You could run on a gun message. And there are towns out there where the blue and the red are so squishy, a libertarian could run on that. And I'm talking about it's going to have to be a tough libertarian.
Sure.
I'm not talking about someone with a bow tie, and I like bow ties, but it's not someone with a bow tie. Somebody who is a veteran, maybe, somebody who has a way about them and is like, look, you elect me, and it's not going to happen. This is not going to happen in this town. And people are just, I mean, do you know how many people have gotten elected on two issues, just running on two issues? I mean, look at Trump. What was Trump's issue? Trump's issues was
immigration and trade and the wars.
Yeah, that's it. And he got elected. It's that simple. I mean, but it's populism. It works. Sorry. I'm sorry that it works. You can be a libertarian populist. Ron Paul was.
Yeah, there ain't nothing wrong with that. I mean, as opposed to what? Like libertarian elitism? I mean, all right.
I like that
talking to yourself in a room, man. That ain't gonna get you anywhere. Like it has to be populism. It has to be libertarianism for the masses. Absolutely. And look, the left and the right are all wet. I mean, it's not like they know what the hell they're doing. The centrist establishment has ruined everything, and people are moving to the further socialist left and the more nationalist right. But that ain't the answer. It's liberty that's the answer to all of these things. So the time is right for people to hear our message for sure. And so there's a lot to feel defeatist about in terms of how bad everything is going. But then also, just like Rahm Emanuel and Condoleezza Rice agree, man, and every crisis is an opportunity, and you don't want to let one go to waste. And so right now there are a lot of people looking to us. Okay, you're so smart. And what should we do then? Well, now that you ask, actually, we thought about this and we got some ideas of it. And here's the other thing too, is that I think makes it a lot easier, right? Is that we don't have this big program for all the stuff we want to do. We just have a big program for all this stuff we want to stop doing. And that to me sounds fair enough, right? I'm not trying to ask you like, hey, we got to build a train for a new, high-speed train from San Diego to New York or whatever. We're not doing that, man. We just want to stop the wars, stop the bailouts and the corrupt crony capitalism and the police state and the lockdowns and the drug wars and all the things that are, tearing the society apart. And we'll start with all that first. And I think that's the kind of, me and Dave Smith have been talking about this and going through like, this is exactly like what we want to focus on in what order and all these things. And he put out a tweet like that. He goes, listen, attention, liberty movement. If we can all agree on the lockdowns, the wars, the bailouts and corruption and the police state and whatever the list, a few more in the list, then we ought to all be able to unite as the liberty movement. Liberty unite, hashtag, whatever the hell. And the first response to him said, hey, you don't have to be a libertarian to believe in that. And Dave goes, yeah, exactly. So first of all, here's something that all libertarians can agree on. And then secondly, this is something all Americans can agree on. And the libertarians are just right about all of it at the same time. You know, you might find a Democrat or Republican who's good on some of these things some of the time. We're good on all these things all the time. But that's the narrative. And I think especially unless Trump is the nominee, I don't know, that throws everything completely into the air. But it seems like we're going to have a very weak Republican and Democrat candidate in 2024. They're not going to have a message at all, really. What's Kamala Harris going to run on in 2024? You know, steady as she goes or whatever. Like, yeah. And then, and we're going to have Dave and, dropping all of this stuff in a way where he will be, obviously not the top vote getter, but he will be, I predict, the dominant force in the political discussion in 2024. And the agenda for politics on the presidential level in 2024 will be lockdowns and wars and bank bailouts and crony capitalism and the drug war and the police state and the militarization and the NSA spying and all the things that Dave says. This is what we Americans care about. This is what we demand be stopped now. That is going to be the discussion in 2024. And the Libertarian Party and our presidential candidate and the Mises Caucus and the Libertarian movement in general, we're going to make it that way. And as you say, look, on the local elections, hey, we got a lot of local elections between now and 24, which means we could have a lot of people who are in power on the county judge level, the city council level, mayors and sheriffs and whoever, like you're talking about, who are all endorsing Dave from their newfound positions that they've been running for and winning on the local level as well, and supporting all of that. And frankly, like, even if Trump gets the nomination, and you have like the populist right, they're all going to vote for him in the end. You could still run a campaign on, yeah, but you got to support Dave all the way up until election day, then at least, because don't you want Trump to be responsible to Dave Smith, not to Kamala Harris, for whatever her attacks against him are? Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. If Trump's going to have to bend, don't you want him to bend towards Smith and not toward Harris? Right. And so, like, I think there's just so much potential, for our entire movement from coast to coast and town and country and local and state and national level politics. Now, I would not be surprised at all if we got Libertarian members of the House of Representatives by the end of the decade, one or two at least, or Republicans who are good enough, at trying to be Ron Paul facsimiles up there, and, like Thomas Massey's pretty close. I lost you.
I'd rather be some governors, but
yeah, well, I'd take that too.
Yeah.
But you know what? Like, even on your senator thing, not to quibble with you, but David Chipman is withdrawing his nomination to be ATF director because there are enough Republican senators who were like, no, I'm not voting for this guy. They had to back down and take it down.
Yeah.
And, for people who don't know, he helped prosecute the surviving Branch Davidians and, should have been exiled out of this country 25 years ago for that. But anyway, at least he's not going to be the ATF director there. So, all this stuff matters on all these different levels. I think one of the big problems in the libertarian movement now is there's kind of an unspoken premise that there's not enough of us to go around. But I don't think that that's right. I think there are plenty of people to do free state stuff in New Hampshire and to do YAL stuff in their state legislatures and do Libertarian Party stuff on their city council and do a Dave Smith presidential run and complain on Twitter all day and run businesses and do all kinds of things. Be a donor for a pretty good Republican in your area that you can influence. They're like, look, man, I always give you a few $1,000 because I think you're pretty good, but man, you need to get over this Warhawk stuff, or you need to get over this drug war stuff, whatever it is, find your spot, make your difference. People used to get frustrated at Ron Paul. They go, okay, Ron, I'm 100% down, dude. What do I do? And then he would always say the same thing. Do whatever you want, man. That's the whole thing, is freedom. But the point was, they didn't necessarily have a good idea of what to do. But his idea was, yeah, but still, you're just gonna have to figure that out. Figure out where you fit in and where you can, or where you don't fit in, but you can wedge yourself in there and make a push and make a change. So I'm really optimistic about where everything is now, if only just because how screwed up everything is, Pete.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't really have anything else. So, did you have
Yeah.
anything?
Yeah, all I was going to say was this Saturday in DC, I'm giving a protest. It's at John Marshall Park at noon on September 11th, and it's the End the Damn Wars protest. And it's supposed to be left wing and right wing and Libertarian Party people and hopefully Greens and whoever else. And then we're going to try to meet up with the Friends Committee and, you know, some other peace protests that are going on at that time right down there. So I have no idea how many people are going to come. I really hope that it's thousands and thousands and matters and looks good on YouTube later and things. I don't know what's going to happen, but you know, 20 years is almost unbelievable. So somebody's got to show up and mark the day.
Yeah.
You know, if we get nothing else out of it. And then that's it. Free Julian Assange. And see you guys next Thursday.
Well, let's tell people, go to the YouTube, because I'm going to release this in audio version on my
Oh, okay.
podcast.
Yeah, that's a
So
good idea.
go to the Libertarian Institute page and subscribe, like this video, so we can start building it up and have a much better reach. We talked about doing this weekly. We'll try to do it weekly, but at least bi-weekly.
Yeah.
And
Oh, that's right. I forgot we talked about that. Yeah, every other week
yeah,
would be good.
so we'll try and build this up and even bring other people on, because there's a lot of people at the Institute that are that know a lot of things that we don't.
Yeah, man. And, you know, yeah, we should really end with that is, you know, the crew at the Libertarian Institute, our editor, Hunter Durensis, our executive editor, of course, Sheldon Richmond, and news editor, Kyle Anselone. And then, of course, we got our great group of podcasters. Me and Pete each have our own podcast. Of course, Kyle and Will Porter do Conflicts of Interest. And then Keith Knight and Patrick McFarlane each have their own podcast. And then Tommy Salmons as well, our great trucker friend podcast. And I guess sometimes from the road out there. So yeah, and we got a bunch of great writers too, Lori Calhoun and Kim Robinson, and you know, I don't know whatever happened to good old what's his name was writing for us, Bradley Thomas, kind
Oh,
of faded away. I
yeah.
need to find him again. Connor Freeman is another great one, and so lots of great stuff to read and to listen to there at libertarianinstitute.org, and
All right,
including
man.
this show.
Thank you, brother.
All right, cool. See you next time, man.